It was just past midnight when my phone buzzed. I was half asleep, the bedroom filled with that soft, static hum of appliances and the dim blue light from the charging dock by the bed. The screen lit up with Haley's name. I figured it was a goodnight voice message. Something sweet, maybe tired. She told me earlier she had a late work dinner. Some kind of team-building thing or maybe a client meeting. I honestly didn't catch all the details. It was one of those evenings where I just nodded along, trusting her version of the story without question. I pressed play. At first, her voice came through as expected. Light, casual, slightly tipsy, maybe. But then I heard it, the unmistakable clink of glass on glass. Then laughter. Hers and someone else's. A man. His voice was clearer than it should have been. Not distant, not ambient, close. He said something, and she laughed again. Not her performative, work networking kind of laugh. Her real one. The laugh she used to let out when she curled up next to me on the couch, when we'd be 2 episodes deep into a dumb show with wine and no plans. I sat up in bed, suddenly alert. I don't know why I did it, but I opened the audio file in an app one use for work. I'm a sound designer by trade. I record, I edit, I mix. When you spend your days teasing whispers out of noise, you learn to hear things most people miss. And even half asleep, some part of my brain knew there was more buried in that file than she probably realized. Within minutes, I'd filtered the audio, cleaned it up. Layer by layer, the clatter of cutlery faded. The terrace chatter blurred into the background, and the voices, hers and his, stood out like they were sitting across from me. If this engagement plays out the way we want, the payoff's going to be serious. Her voice, her words. I froze. Not because of what she said exactly, but because of how she said it. Flat, focused, like she was talking about a pitch deck or a brand strategy. Not our relationship. Not us. That word, engagement, didn't sound romantic. It sounded transactional. I hit pause. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it was part of a work conversation. A campaign launch. A merger. Something innocent with bad optics. I wanted that to be true. Desperately. But the man's voice came back, lower this time. Warmer. Almost familiar. You've got him wrapped, Hales. Just don't let the ring slow you down. Her reply? A muffled laugh. And then, please. He still thinks this is all about love. She said it like it was funny. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, unmoving. Something about the way she said still thinks. Like it was a joke. Like I was the punchline. I must have replayed those lines 10 times before I realized my hands were trembling. And then, out of instinct or maybe disbelief, I checked the file metadata. That's when the last layer of denial peeled away. The voice message wasn't recorded at a restaurant or some downtown office, or even a co-working lounge. The geotag embedded in the file showed the exact coordinates of a boutique hotel on the waterfront. A place we'd passed together more than once. She always said it was too flashy for her. Not her scene. Now, apparently it was. There was also a timestamp, 11:42 p.m. I took a moment, closed the app, sat there in silence. The kind of silence that feels like it weighs something. At 7:14 the next morning, I got a long text from her. Bright, effervescent, too upbeat for the hour. She said the meeting went late. They were all joking around. Someone dared her to send a fake voice memo. Something dramatic, she wrote. She said she was surprised I'd taken it seriously. That I needed to relax. That she loved me, and I was reading into things that weren't there. There was a string of laughing emojis at the end. Then a heart. Then a joke about how bad hotel Wi-Fi was. Her way of pivoting the conversation, playing both sides, flirty and defensive. But here's the thing about damage control. When it's that fast, it usually means there was something to hide. And I wasn't new to this. I'd dated before, been lied to before, been reassured before, but never like this. Not with her. Still, I didn't respond. I wasn't sure what I could say that wouldn't sound like a trap. I didn't want to accuse her and be wrong. But I didn't want to sit there pretending I didn't hear what I heard. Instead, I got dressed. I packed a small bag. Essentials. Some work stuff, gym clothes, my headphones, a passport, and 2 chargers. I wasn't running, but I wasn't going to keep sleeping next to someone whose loyalty I now had to second-guess. Before I left, I placed her keys on the table next to the espresso machine. Then I opened the fridge and grabbed the bottle of almond milk she liked in her smoothies, something she always forgot to buy but insisted on having. I placed it in the center of the table. Next to it, I left a note. No dramatic lines. Just, "Don't call." That was it. No confrontation. No scene. I closed the door behind me with care. Not a slam, not a statement. Just a quiet decision. And for the first time in weeks, I noticed how different the air felt. Still heavy, but no longer uncertain. I didn't feel heartbroken. Not yet, anyway. It was more like watching a glitch in a system you helped build. A slow realization that the code wasn't clean, that something foundational had shifted when you weren't looking. That voice message? It didn't just break trust. It rewired the story we'd been telling ourselves. And the more I thought about it, the man's voice, the tone in hers, the choice of hotel, the timing, the less it felt like a misunderstanding and more like a mask slipping. I didn't go to a friend's place. I didn't book a hotel. I just drove for a while, letting the city get small in the rearview mirror. Windows down, wind loud enough to drown out my own thoughts. The only plan I had was to not be wherever she was. I figured I'd give her space to think. Not about me. About what she just risked. About what she just revealed, intentionally or not. What I didn't realize at the time was that this moment, this late-night memo, this grainy audio file with careless laughter and cold strategy, wasn't an accident. It was a preview, a fragment, the beginning of a much bigger truth. And that truth would unfold piece by piece. The first few days after I left were quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not peaceful. More like the stillness after a detonation, where dust hangs in the air and nothing's quite settled. I'd taken my things and stayed in a short-term rental on the other side of town. A place with no history, no memories attached, no scent of her perfume still clinging to the pillows. Just four walls, a bed, and silence. And in that silence, things started to float up. Things I hadn't let myself look at before. At first, they came in fragments. A shrug here, a late return there. But soon, it felt like I was watching the last 2 years of my life on replay with a different filter. The kind you don't apply until you need to see clearly. The first thing that stuck out was the yoga. Haley started going religiously about 8 months ago. Not the occasional weekend class like before, but full-on, I needed to stay centered mode. 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. But I'd never seen a single check-in on her fitness app. No tagged locations. No stories. She used to post everything. A smoothie got a boomerang. A dog on the street got a full caption. So why nothing about the one place she supposedly spent hours every week? Then I remembered the phone. Always face down. Always on silent. Sometimes on airplane mode even when she wasn't flying. She said it was to disconnect. That it helped her focus and sleep better. I bought that line at first. I even admired it. I thought maybe I should do that too. Maybe I'm too attached to mine. Now I saw it differently. Her disconnecting didn't feel peaceful anymore. Felt like concealment. There were more signs. Smaller ones that stacked up one after the other. Cash. Haley had always used cards for everything. She was the kind of person who color-coded her budget spreadsheet. But lately she'd been carrying cash. $100 bills. She said it was for tipping better or impulse buys. But she'd never been impulsive. Not like that. And I couldn't shake the memory of her slipping a thick envelope into her gym bag once when she thought I wasn't looking. Then there were the stylist sessions. At first, I was flattered she wanted to change up her look. I'm evolving, she said. New vibe, new energy. But sometimes those sessions ran late. Real late, like past midnight. And she'd come back with no bags, no receipts, no new clothes. Just a vague smile and an excuse about deep conversations and wine. Other times, she came back smelling like perfume she didn't own. A scent I never saw on her dresser. A scent that didn't match any of the samples she hoarded in her drawer. It wasn't just what I saw or didn't see. It was the way she moved around me, the space she kept, the dodging of questions that weren't even loaded. Where were you tonight? Oh, around. Which studio did you go to? It was a pop-up. My friend booked it. Which friend? Just some of the girls. You don't know them. Her answers were always light, floaty, just enough to deflect, never enough to clarify. Then there was the calendar. Locked up tight. Haley used to share everything with me. We had a shared Google Calendar for appointments, date nights, reminders. Slowly, she started hiding events. I'd ask, "Hey, you busy Thursday?" And she'd glance at her phone, then say, "Oh yeah, something came up. Just a thing. Just a thing." That phrase became a placeholder for whatever I wasn't supposed to ask about. The worst part? I didn't even challenge it. I wanted to believe her. I kept telling myself that love meant trust, and trust meant not interrogating her. But I was starting to see how she *p*nized that trust. Turned it into cover. Even her ride shares raised questions. Same drop-off points, again and again, always in the same small quadrant of the city. A residential area with no studios, no cafes, no mutual friends. When I casually asked once, she shrugged and said, "Oh, that's where my stylist's new loft is. She works out of her apartment now." But I remembered the buildings in that area, tight, old houses with no commercial markings. And it wasn't a one-off. The same route showed up week after week. I also noticed changes in how she handled her cloud backups. She used to love showing me her photo dumps. "Look what I took today," she'd say, scrolling through sunsets, coffee art, dogs and sweaters. But in the last 6 months, nothing. Her albums were mostly empty, or locked. One day, I walked past her laptop while it was open and caught the corner of a new album title, hidden behind a privacy icon. I didn't say anything, but my stomach dropped. It was all adding up. And once I let myself look back honestly, I realized I hadn't been blind. I'd looked away, on purpose. I saw the late nights, the new routines, the distance, and I explained them all away. Because love makes you do that. Makes you rewrite red flags as quirks. Makes you turn intuition into overreaction. Makes you apologize for seeing too much. But now all I saw was a pattern. A carefully maintained system of hiding in plain sight. She knew just how much to show. Just how much to share. Just enough to keep me off balance. I sat in my rental that evening, staring at my laptop. I opened a blank document and started typing everything I could remember. Every odd moment, every out-of-place detail. A timeline began to form. Not one built on facts yet, but on inconsistencies. Friction points. A map of behaviors that no longer fit the story she'd been telling. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of heartbreak exactly, but because I felt stupid. I'd always thought of myself as perceptive, rational, a guy who notices patterns. And somehow I'd been living inside one for nearly a year, completely unaware, or maybe unwilling to be aware. I kept coming back to that voice memo, to the man's voice, her laugh, the casual tone when she talked about our engagement like it was leverage, a tool, something she was working toward, not out of love, but for gain. And now, every odd moment I'd ignored had a place in that framework. Even the smallest things. The time she wore a silk scarf I'd never seen before and claimed it was a gift from her coworker, then avoided eye contact. The random charges on her card marked as consulting that she said were for coaching sessions, but never produced receipts for. The perfume on my jacket once, after she hugged me in the hallway, that I knew for sure wasn't hers. Individually, they were explainable. Together, they were a system, a machine built to hide. And I'd been inside it, playing my role, loving, trusting, loyal, never realizing that I wasn't the main character in the story. Just the placeholder, the fiancé-shaped investment. There's a specific kind of dread that comes when you stop wondering and start knowing. Not guessing, not suspecting, knowing. It was late afternoon when I decided to pull the records. I'd been staring at my phone for an hour, rereading old texts, digging through anything that might give me clarity. Her words always sounded just right, like they were edited for impact, perfectly calibrated for damage control. But people forget one thing about lying. It's hard to keep the back end clean. We were on a shared family phone plan. Just 2 lines, hers and mine. Or so I thought. The account portal was nothing fancy. A dashboard, usage stats, billing cycles. I scrolled aimlessly at first, not knowing what I was looking for. Then I spotted it, line 3. A number I didn't recognize, hidden under an alias. Mona G. I stared at the name like it might rearrange itself into something harmless. Mona G. It didn't match any of Haley's friends. Not her mom, not a coworker. I checked the activation date, 8 months ago, right around the time her yoga obsession began. The line had steady usage, calls, texts, data, but it wasn't tied to any of her known devices. That's when it hit me. The sunglasses case. Weeks back, I'd been looking for a phone charger in her closet and noticed an old designer glasses case tucked behind a row of heels. She said it was empty, just holding on to it for travel. I hadn't thought twice, but now, I tore through that memory, realized I hadn't checked inside. A day later, I went back to the apartment. She wasn't home, and found the case exactly where I remembered. Inside was a slim, black phone. No lock screen, just a glowing home display and a wallpaper of a sunset that wasn't ours. I opened the Messages app. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. The contact list was nearly empty. Just one pinned thread at the top. See red heart. I opened it. 8 months of texts, bookings, hotel confirmations, payment screensh *TS, jokes, pictures, names of places I didn't know, references to dates that overlapped with her stylist sessions and networking events. Mentions of me, some indirect, some not. He's still in the clouds. Wants to plan a honeymoon in Portugal. Let him. It'll make the split look cleaner. Get the prenup in place before the launch party. Once that hits, he's gonna think this is real. If we sell it right, we can float for at least a year on the optics alone. I stopped scrolling. The timestamps lined up. The meetings, the overnights, the late-night excuses. There were even pictures. Selfies in robes. Champagne in bed. Receipts for 2 breakfasts charged to a room number under Haley's name. And worse, digital key entries showing both devices unlocking the same door minutes apart. I should have felt anger, fury, but mostly I felt still, like my brain had moved into a new gear, one that didn't allow feeling, just assessment. I opened the photo app. There, buried in a folder marked archive, was a video, silent, 30 seconds, grainy footage from what looked like a hallway. A man held the camera low to the ground, filming the corridor. The lens tilted slightly as Haley walked into frame. Same dress from a photo I'd taken of her weeks ago. And then a man entered beside her. They stood in front of a hotel door. She glanced back once, smiling. Then he kissed her neck. She laughed, pulled him inside, and the door closed behind them. I stared at the paused frame. Her silhouette, his hand on her back. A moment caught forever in pixels she never thought I'd see. I finally looked at the contact name again. C. Redheart. It wasn't some stranger. I could see now his face, barely in frame, matched someone I knew, or thought I knew. He looked eerily like someone Haley had once introduced as family. Casual. A cousin. Visiting for the holidays. Back then, I thought nothing of it. The resemblance, the timing, the mentions in passing. I hadn't made the connection. But now it clicked like a lock turning. C wasn't a stranger. And this wasn't a fling. It was a plan. They'd been mapping out post-wedding logistics, talking about shared assets, about what she'd extract from the marriage before she made her exit. There were conversations about holding patterns and timelines, about delaying the PR angle until things cooled. And just like that, the image of our relationship, our life, our future, fractured into something unrecognizable. This wasn't emotional infidelity. It wasn't impulsive. It was structured, strategic. I backed up the phone, took screensh *TS, saved everything to an encrypted drive. I didn't touch her things. I didn't call her. I didn't even breathe a word. Instead, I sat there, staring at the glowing screen, realizing that every doubt I'd pushed down, every gut instinct I'd suppressed, had been right. I wasn't paranoid. I was being groomed. conditioned to question my own reality while she coordinated a parallel one. One that had no room for me in it except as a means to an end. I thought about the wedding venue, the joint savings account, the down payment she insisted we contribute equally toward, despite her knowing full well she planned to disappear with her half. I thought about her family, the smiles, the dinners, the way her sister always seemed too quiet around me. I hadn't realized back then how silence can be a form of complicity. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It wasn't even just physical. It was existential. They weren't planning a future without me. They were planning to use me to fund theirs. And I had the receipts. Literal ones. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry either. I did something else. I started writing a new kind of list. Finding the second phone should have been the final chapter. Instead, it turned out to be the prologue. I could have stopped there, taken the screenshot *TS, sent them to a lawyer, called off the engagement with a single text and vanished. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized this didn't feel new. Felt practiced. Too smooth. Too methodical. Too familiar even in its cruelty. That's when I started wondering. Had she done this before? It was just a hunch at first. A gut itch. But now I trusted my gut like it was gospel. I went back through her old photos, the ones she hadn't scrubbed or hidden away. I searched tags, geotags, archived comments, reverse image searched a few with strangers in the background just to see if names popped up. I opened old party albums on her sister's social pages, ones she didn't think I'd ever check. I kept seeing the same name, Tyler. I remembered him vaguely. Haley had once mentioned him as a total train wreck of an ex, some guy she met through a startup. Said he moved to Colorado, ghosted everyone, and spiraled. The way she told it, it was a mess. Emotional damage, unpaid bills, betrayal. Now I wasn't so sure who had betrayed who, so I started digging. Old social media mentions, LinkedIn updates, group photos in startup newsletters. Then I found it, an archived video from a pitch competition in Seattle. There she was, arm around Tyler, both pitching a product as co-founders. They looked inseparable. And then, after 2019, radio silence. No press. No launch. No company. No co-founder. Just Tyler gone. But the internet never forgets, not really. With enough search tricks and coffee, I found him. New city. New job. New last name. He changed his online identity. I sent a short message. Nothing dramatic. Just, hi. This is random, but I think we've both been close to the same person. If I'm wrong, feel free to ignore this. But if her name was Haley, and she talked about launch funding, yoga, or a Lisbon honeymoon, we should talk. He replied 4 hours later. Where do you want to start? We set up a call that night. I didn't know what to expect. A bitter ex, maybe. Someone trying to get back at her. But the man who answered was calm. Measured. Worn down in a way that felt familiar. You're not the first, he said. And then he told me everything. According to Tyler, they'd been together for 3 years. First as colleagues, then partners, both in business and in life. They co-founded a wellness tech startup. She brought the brand. He built the product. She was magnetic, charismatic, and smart as hell. Investors loved her. He did too. But then came the expansion phase. That's what she called it. Haley pushed for early engagement. It looks better for press, she'd said. Stability equals trust. Sound familiar? She wanted to get married before funding closed. She said it would help their image, make them look more grown up, more bankable. He agreed. He was in love. Then came the sudden stylist appointments, the yoga retreats, late-night coaching sessions. Things he thought were weird, but wrote off as ambition. She was driven, always had a plan. That's when she started suggesting they split financials. Just temporarily. Just to clean up for the accountants. She convinced him to let her handle one of the business accounts, briefly, so she could pay a designer overseas who wouldn't take American banking. Said she'd reimburse him. She never did. 2 months later, she ghosted him. No warning. No breakup. She just disappeared. Tyler found out the truth weeks later. She'd emptied their shared business account, moved states, and cut ties with everyone in their circle. The startup folded. He took the blame. Most people assumed he had burned out or mismanaged funds. She made it look like I ran, he said. I spent a year rebuilding my name. I sat there, stunned, as he described details that mirrored my own life. The sudden interest in private coaching, the reliance on cash, the curated public image, even the Lisbon reference. And then came the part that made my blood run cold. Did she ever mention a woman named Amber? He asked. I paused. Yeah, I said slowly. That's her sister. She said they're not close. He let out a bitter laugh. They're very close. Tyler had tracked Amber's Venmo and bank activity for months after the fallout. He suspected she was involved. Not just complicit, in on it. Money from Haley's accounts would land in Amber's, sometimes within hours of big withdrawals. They booked flights together, hotels, conferences. One email Tyler intercepted suggested they were running some kind of brand consultancy under fake names. When I told him about Mona G. and the second phone, he was silent for a moment. I bet there's a third phone, he said finally. There was with me. He was right. I hadn't checked the false bottom in her luggage yet, the one she used for event samples and PR kits. But I had a feeling I knew what I'd find. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a template, a blueprint. She ran the same scheme with Tyler, only I was the cleaner version. The Fiancée 2.0. A rebrand. Where Tyler had been the tech co-founder, I was the stable guy with predictable income and zero drama. Perfect for a professional glow-up. She'd learned from her first attempt. Smoothed the edges. Refined the pitch. Tyler had been the beta test. I was the launch. He and I ended the call quietly. No anger. Just recognition. Like two people who'd both been pulled into the same current without realizing we were drowning in it. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, thinking, not about love, about logistics. What they had built wasn't just a lie, it was a small business of betrayal. A revolving door of partnerships, each tailored for a temporary win. Get close, build trust, extract value, exit, rinse and repeat. And Haley? She wasn't impulsive. She was running a playbook. When I finally shut my laptop, the weight of it all didn't crash down on me like I expected. There was no dramatic breakdown, no shouting into the void, no pacing the floor and asking why. I'd already done that in my head 100 times. And every version ended the same way, with the same truth staring back at me. She was never building a life with me. She was building a story around me. A set piece, placeholder, the safe, steady character in her script. And now that I had all the facts, the fake phone line, the Rayal affair, the pattern, the sister, the scheme, the only question left was what to do about it. Some people burn everything down when they're betrayed. I get it. The urge is real. But that wasn't me. Not anymore. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in clarity, in clean exits, in making sure that when this house of cards collapsed, I wasn't underneath it. So I started slow. The next morning, I called my bank. Haley and I had opened a joint savings account 6 months earlier, supposedly for wedding expenses and shared goals. She loved that phrase, said it made us sound like partners, not just a couple. At the time, I thought it was romantic. Now I knew it was leverage. I froze the account immediately, told the rep there had been potential unauthorized activity, and that I wanted to convert my individual holdings into a protected sub-account. They asked if I wanted to notify the co-owner. I said no. She'd find out soon enough, probably at brunch, when her card got declined for a designer coffee and a side of manipulation. Next, I reached out to the venue. We'd booked a rooftop event space overlooking the bay. Twinkle lights, terrace garden, string quartet, the whole Pinterest core fantasy. I emailed the coordinator directly, asked her to temporarily flag our file for cancellation review. No details, just a note that I might follow up with changes to our status. She responded kindly, said she'd keep things quiet. Then I changed the password on the wedding website. I wasn't trying to humiliate her. I just didn't want her editing the narrative before I had a chance to decide what the truth would be. After that, I made a list of everything with shared access. Spotify, Netflix, our cloud storage, door code app, travel booking sites, even the grocery delivery login. It wasn't about the services, it was about the windows. The little ways she could still watch my habits, still feel close, still stay a few clicks away from me under the illusion of normalcy. So I cut her out of all of it. Quietly, no alerts. Then I backed up everything. Every screenshot *T, every photo, every text thread. I encrypted them, zipped the folder, uploaded it to a secure drive, and labeled it with a date and a fake project title she wouldn't recognize. Just in case. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. Next, I called my lawyer. He was the same guy who helped me with a work contract 2 years ago. Smart, no nonsense, the kind of man who never wasted a sentence. When I explained the situation, he didn't gasp or judge. He just nodded. "I see this more often than you'd think," he said. "Do you have written proof of any financial or legal manipulation?" "Yes," I said. "Good," he replied. "Let's talk asset protection." He drafted a document that same day, a simple clause amendment for our prenup. One she hadn't signed yet, but had verbally agreed to. The new clause would state that any evidence of fraud or intentional deceit in the planning phase of our marriage would nullify her claim to shared property and entitlements. Clean, legal, watertight. I printed a copy, folded it into a thin envelope. Then I went home. She wasn't there, off at some branding seminar or pop-up co-working event, or wherever the latest script said she was supposed to be. I didn't care. I walked into the apartment, made a cup of coffee, and waited. When I finished, I went to the closet. Her wedding dress was hanging on a padded white hanger, zipped in a custom garment bag with the boutique's gold lettering across the top. I stared at it for a moment, not out of sadness, just recognition. This thing, this symbol, wasn't what I thought it was. It wasn't sacred. It was strategic. A chess piece. So I opened the bag. Taped inside the inner lining, I left the envelope. No note, no threat, just the clause. A line in the sand, stitched into satin. I knew she'd find it eventually. Maybe a week before the wedding, maybe 2 hours before hair and makeup. That was the point. A delayed detonation. Then I slid a second envelope under her makeup drawer. That one had the screenshot *TS. A curated few, not everything. Just enough to say, "I see you. I know. I'm not playing anymore." I didn't leave any notes or dramatic flourishes. I didn't need to. Sometimes the most powerful message you can send is silence. Before I left, I took one last walk through the apartment. Not out of nostalgia, just to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. My headphones, my sneakers, my notes. I didn't want to leave a single thread of myself behind. Not for her. Not for whoever came next in her story. As I stood in the doorway, I looked back just once. The place felt different. Hollow. Not because it was empty, but because I finally saw it for what it was. A stage. And I was done performing. I locked the door, slid my key under the mat, walked away. Haley planned a rooftop reunion party, lights, press, stage smiles. A comeback narrative. I showed up alone, calm, and ended it all in one speech. Different values. Private betrayal. Public clarity. No drama, no names. Just facts. Then I handed the coordinator an envelope with dates, receipts, and walked away. Her illusion crumbled mid-toast. People saw the truth without me having to shout. 2 days later, she vanished from socials. A postcard came. No return address, just a photo of us and, "You gave up too easily." I didn't respond. I moved to Boise, downsized, reset. Early mornings, fewer hours, new hobbies, old habits returned. I saw her once at a grocery store. No words, no pain, just distance. The lesson was clear. When trust breaks and guilt is we *P***nized. Don't explain, exit. Swiftly, quietly, with a plan. That's not cowardice. That's self-respect.